who are perfectionists. In the beginning, we used to think that's what God drew this model for. But it's that child who is afraid of making mistakes. It's that all or nothing child who sees it either as a failure or a success. It has to be a certain way. I don't know if you guys realize this, but perfectionists also tend to procrastinate. Why do you think that is? What? Exactly. And if you don't know how to do it right, why start, right? So you just put it off and put it off and put it off. They wind up with a lot of anxiety because they're holding the very thing they don't know how to do in their head all day long and never getting to it. And it's honestly the best thing to do is get over the hard thing first and get them started. Or perfectionists just need to start and get through the thing that they're afraid of because it takes a lot of pressure off their brain. They tend to be really anxious. They have difficulty starting. They have difficulty finishing because when they run into a problem, then they just stop. We had one young man who struggled a lot all the way through school. We didn't understand why, and because he was really bright and he could do really, really great work, but he kept failing his classes. Just so you know, he's now a father and married and an awesome entrepreneur doing fabulous, okay? But he hardly passed, okay? Did you know why? If something didn't go well on a project, he would get to a certain point, and if something wasn't quite right, he'd throw it away. He wouldn't turn it in. And that's your perfectionist who is constantly reluctant to turn in anything less than perfect. They're going to compare themselves to others. They tend to be people pleasers because they want you to they view their identity as never making mistakes. But the sad thing is that there's a loss of joy in schooling when that happens. So I just want you to know you need to make your kids okay to be imperfect learners. Okay, Dr. Kathy Cook talks a lot about different ways the kids learn. Perfectionism isn't one of the things she talks about, although she does have a book called No More Perfect Kids. It's really a good book too. If you have a child like that, or if that's your bent, okay? But I want to talk about her book a little bit because there's so much of her work that can make your work at home more practical and applicable to each child. Some of you have read it in here because it's going to show you different ways that kids learn, okay? Some kids are word smart. They're very much verbal and they like to read and write and talk all the time. I know my youngest granddaughter, when she was in kindergarten, she says, if I can't talk, I can't breathe. She just, whew. Then she has a sister who is very quiet and perfectionism and refuses to make anything less than 100%. So here's a family. And then I want to talk to you about Asa, their brother. They have 4 kids. Asa is in 8th grade. Asa struggles in school, okay? Not because he's not smart, but because he is a body smart kid. Body smart kids are those kids who learn by movement. They can't sit still. They can't just sit in a desk and just work. They need to be moving. And if you have a child like that, you need to understand this is a child who may be standing up to learn. He needs to have something to fidget with. Asa, I know, has to move if he's going to be able to take in information, okay? And he's not built where here he is in a classical school where we read a lot and write a lot. And yes, he needs to do that. That is really, really good for a body smart kid. But it's really interesting for me to think about how kids are and why I bring up Dr. Kathy Cook's book for you to know. She has 8 great smarts. It's based on multiple intelligences, and she does a really good job of giving you practical ways to deal with your child based on how they learn. And she says every child, there should be 3 or 4 that rise to the top. And if you can identify those, then you have a specific way you can approach a subject with them. But Asa this summer is very, very athletic. That's often true of body smart kids. Decided that he was going to spend the summer not doing athletics. So he thought, okay, just taking a break and not doing it. And I watched his joy go away. Football has started again, which is exactly what he needed. And asked him the first day when he went to football practice, and he said, that was really fun. And you see his body settling. You need to know your kids' bents and how they learn. And that's such a beautiful thing for you at home to take advantage of, because God has created your kids really, really uniquely, okay? But back to the challenges. I wrote a book a few years ago called Every Parent's Calling, and in it is a chapter that's parents' favorite often because it's on how to deal with your anxious child, how to deal with your perfectionist, how to deal with your strong-willed child, how to deal with your argumentative child, how to teach your unmotivated child. These are all the things you are going to face. Some of you might have kids that are just going to float through this in a beautiful way and not cause any issues. So you're going to have to see many times those are your people pleasers who don't want to bother you. And your other issue there is that they're going to base their view of themselves on being good versus in Christ's righteousness. Sometimes it's easier for your kids who struggle and do wrong things to understand the gospel. So even your perfect kids and your kids who just want to do everything right, those are sometimes the kids I worry about the most, right? So just know that you're going to be dealing with a lot, and consider that a gift. Consider it a gift of time that you not only get to work at home with them, but you have a school you can partner with, so they're getting this message from both sides. So I'm going to go back now to the understanding your child. Many of you have little kids. So if you want to flip to the next chart, we'll talk to you about kids, because when they're little, they are often acting out of their brainstem, okay? They're brainstem reactors, okay? They have not yet grown, especially if they're tired or thirsty or hungry or sick or uncomfortable. Sometimes all they need is a snack or a glass of water. But our primary goal as parents is to move them from thinking back here to their prefrontal cortex. That's where logic takes place. That's where reasoning takes place. That's where they are learning to think. But it's still under construction. So in many ways, you are their external prefrontal cortex. Okay? You really are. You're doing the thinking for them. They're not really... That's the part where they gain self-control. That's the part where they do problem-solving, wise decision-making. But hey, they're not there. And all the way through, you're moving them more toward thinking here. And that's why we stay calm when they can't. We lend perspective when emotions are high. We guide them toward better choices, because over time, this consistent modeling and loving correction with limits, they learn to take on those skills. And this is one of the most beautiful things for me to see in the home, is you have a chance to work on this, right? So how many of you guys have really emotional kids? Okay, this is what I always see. I see so many emotion-driven, strong-willed kids today. And I believe that God is creating these kids for a purpose, right? They have passion, they have drive, they know what they want, they're not easily swayed, right? Talk about wonderful gifts down the road, right? But they can make parenting really, really challenging, okay? And that's gonna show up in your days at home, because they're not gonna always wanna do what you're asking them to do. So just a couple tips on that. When you have a child who's about ready to melt into a puddle and you know it, catch them before it happens. Like, hey, I can tell you're going to fall apart, or this is really frustrating for you. Go take a breather, pray, walk, or do something. Because if they melt into a puddle, you're not going to reach them. They're thinking out here. They're in their brainstem. And until you can move them back to thinking here, anything you say will not work. You'll wind up both saying things you regret because they're just an emotional mess at that point, okay? I, many times with my perfectionistic kids, are the ones that also tend to melt. I'll say, I can tell you're really upset over this. Take a breather, you're not in trouble. But take a pause. to get them back to being centered, right? We have to think for them at that point. My youngest granddaughter, Bethlehem, is highly emotional, highly volatile, highly loving, highly angry. She's all that. I love her dearly. I would just give her a place. I'd say, okay, Beth, this is where you get to throw your fit. Away from school, away from the rest of us working. Get yourself okay and steadfast, and then you can come back. So it's not like a time out. It's a, I know you're not handling this right now. Because if I were to deal with her and try to make her handle it at that moment, what's going to happen? Yep, it's going to make it worse. So Beth would learn. She had a place where she could go meltdown. There was a place that she could go deal with her emotion. Now, I know like gentle parenting will tell you to jump into their mess with them. They just need to learn to calm themselves down. Anyway, Beth is great. The other thing about kids at this age, and you can move to the next slide, is they're lagging in their executive function. We talked about that earlier. They are not developed here. There are people, like boys in particular, who don't get their full executive function till their 20s. So you're dealing with kindergarten through fourth graders, okay? So know their developmental stage. And again, I just want to say that you have the beauty in this model to know what executive function skills you can focus on because they're essential for life. Like working memory is so important. That is remembering multiple step directions, remembering what they're writing, remembering to bring things to school and bring things back. Some of these kids are going to be really lagging. Some of your kids are going to be great. They're going to have different skills and strengths, but these are areas, if you can focus on and identify, you know what to do. Then you know what habits to start to work on to grow what you're needing to grow. See what I'm saying? It's all about that. So others are going to have trouble initiating tasks, especially your perfectionists, but it's because they don't quite know how to start. They don't know where to begin. So they avoid assignments. They're going to stall. How do I do this perfectly comes into their brain. What if it's wrong? It's so amazing to me how kids can take perfectionism and really, here they're wanting to do so well, and the very root of perfectionism is going to hurt their performance. Perfectionists can become your underperformers because they find it safer to just do less. So it's a safety net. They don't have to say, okay, I didn't do well because I didn't try, versus if I put it all on the line and it's not good enough, what is that saying about me? That's their fear. So I have Alma, again, my perfectionist. Last year I decided I was going to start every day out. I try all sorts of different things with my grandkids, but I decided we were going to start out the day reading a scripture and then asking them to spend 8 minutes is what I was doing, because they weren't kindergartners then. They were like 4th through 6th. What God was speaking to them from the verse. I wanted them to have time to really feel like they could hear the Lord, and it wasn't just us talking, to grow that ability to commune themselves. Alma was absolutely in tears day after day when I tried it, and absolutely refused. And I didn't understand why until finally one day I said, okay, Alma, I don't get this. I don't get what the problem is with what I'm asking you to do. And she said, and we have an idea what a perfectionist would say? She said, what if I hear God wrong? There was a right and a wrong in this process for her, and she had to get it right before she could actually try. So we had to work through the fact that hearing the Lord, there wasn't this, she could relax in that. It's beautiful to watch her growing there. There's also the kids with emotional regulation. I talked about that already, these emotional outbursts and meltdowns. That's going to happen when things are changing, when transitions are happening, when frustration sets in, when they don't know what they're doing, they easily fall about. That's an executive function skill, okay? It's something we can grow. That's the beauty of it. Organizing and planning. Some kids are going to be highly organized. Others are just going to not have the skills at all, and you're going to have to teach them that. How to have a clean backpack or desk, or how to keep their items together, how to just get assignments turned in, just the organizational skills that can be lagging in some kids. It's just there. It's a part of it. And finally, the inhibition control, the interrupting, the blurting out answers, the struggling to wait turns. I know that for many years, in my books, if you've read any of them, I speak a lot about William, who's now 15. He was my toddler when I first started teaching, so wound up teaching him all the way through. He's now 10th grade, and he was just that kid who never had gained that self-control of controlling his impulses. Very impulsive, very reactive, very quick to just mess up. And I just think it's been a wonderful process to see how he has grown in that and where he's learned it from. It's interesting for me is soccer. It's school, but it's soccer. He is a high-level soccer player. We took him to Germany on a U.S. team this summer, actually. But anyway, what happens in soccer if you're impulsive and foul? You get a yellow card, you get a red card, your team gets destroyed. So he has had to learn how to not be impulsive through soccer. Kids need different things. He goes out on the soccer field now before he plays, and I watch him with his arms up, asking the Lord to give him self-control. It just blesses my heart. But he was just such a mess. He was the kid who tried to drive their car when he was 3. He really is a love will. But those are all these executive function skills, and you need to know what they're lagging in, and you have that opportunity to firsthand pray through it, and let the Lord show you what to do with them. Okay, you can go to the next slide here. This is what we talked about earlier, so we can skip that. But I did want to tell you that just to remember to always keep that balance in mind. Here's that chart I was telling you about earlier. So here you are, 100% in charge, child isn't. They're in the middle. Your kids aren't there yet, but they're maybe starting in 4th. But in the middle when you're crossing, that's when there's a lot of conflict between parent and child often, right? Because you're having to let go. They're wanting increasing freedom, but you're seeing that they need to be responsible. They're not necessarily wanting responsibility, but the two are tied hand in hand. All the way through, give your kid increasing freedom when they're showing responsibility, that they know responsibility is what's the pathway to the freedom they want. They want a lot of freedom in those logic middle school years, but they're not always ready for it. But you need to start to increasingly give it to it. If you wait too long, you're going to have conflict. If you give it too early, you're going to have conflict. So you need to see when they're ready. I know that even with 3rd and 4th grade, you're easing into them being more and more responsible, doing more on their own. You need to feed into their need to grow responsible and free, right? And hopefully by the time they graduate, they're really ready to be fully responsible. Okay. One of the things on that, I've seen what will happen to parents at home is while they're little, you do have to sit with them and show them. But if you could, as they start like 3rd, 4th grade, even 2nd, have this mindset that you're going to help them when you see them working. That they don't wait for you to sit by them to work. Does that make sense? So I want to, if you have a child who's struggling with math and they're just sitting there waiting for you, you can say, hey, I'm looking for you to try first or move to the next problem, then I'll step in. You want to encourage that individual effort, right? So they're not relying on you. You want to raise kids who don't need you. That's not always easy. But, okay. Earlier we talked about, you can move to the next slide here. We talked about this already. I just want to remind you, habit is what we're doing in all of this, and you're teaching it first, right? You're practicing it, and then you're gradually stepping back so you don't have to be relying on constant reminders. It's happy day when you see kids doing things that you've wanted them to do and you're not having to remind them. That is the goal. But it's the repeated practice that grows habits, that grow that virtue. So that's kind of the pathway there, okay? Next here, this is Keith McCurdy, and he is growing. Has anyone heard of Keith McCurdy? Raising Sturdy Kids. He has a really important point that we are to, from little on, and even 2-year-olds can do tasks, grow kids from consumers to contributors. So they're from entitlement to ownership. It's not just about rights and privileges. It's thinking less about me and more about others. And this is because contribution builds identity for your kids. So in your school days at home, be thinking of all the things that they can join in and do themselves. This is what's going to grow intrinsic motivation when they own it, because contributors are going to develop purpose. Consumers just want comfort and entertainment, right? Contributors become resilient because they have things they can do and the confidence to do it. And they wind up building stronger relationships, and they're really better prepared, okay? So again, you have that opportunity at home. Don't do everything for them. Think of ways you can grow that ability. They're happier when they learn how to contribute and serve people. They really, really are. I'm moving through this part fast because I have all these practical things too for you to do. But gospel, I wanted to mention this again. Your kids are going to make mistakes. Have an easy response to mistakes. Let them learn their learning opportunities. Their mistakes do not define them. Growth is going to happen through mistakes. And I want to give you a quick, simple thought on when your kid actually does something wrong, because they will, okay? We're not talking about mistakes here. Mistakes is just, you handle those because they're learning opportunities. Doing something wrong is really sin, because we're all capable of that. The very, very first step with that is you need to get your kids to admit what they did. Confession. You can't move forward with discipleship if they won't confess and own what they've done, okay? So at home, as you're working with them, if they've done something wrong, confession is step one. Some kids, it takes a long time, but you really can't move past discipling their hearts if they won't admit what they did. It's not casting blame. It's not coming up with reasons. It's what did they do? And you can't accept, I don't know, which is what they want to tell you, right? It might take time, but then when they have confessed, we need to take them to the gospel. Do you believe Jesus forgave you? Do you believe you're forgiven? I forgive you. And then do you believe Jesus can help you do better next time, right? And after that, what would you do differently next time? This is the biblical path to repentance. But try again, express your belief that they can do better next time. This is hard for your perfectionistic kids. They don't want to admit it. It's hard to get them to confess that they did anything wrong, but it's well worth the wait. You can't really move forward if you haven't, okay? So we're going to move to some really practical things now. In everything that you're doing with your kids, our focus is on academics, and it's going to be really easy to step into correction all the time. Connect first, right? We talked about that earlier, warmth and authority. Warm connection makes their heart receptive to your teaching, okay? Empathy, like, I understand this is frustrating, I understand this is hard, is more effective than anger, right? We don't want to empathize with dumb things, like if they're whining about something that is just to get your attention or to hook you and feeling worried about them. But if there's something genuinely going on they're upset over, just empathize there and then talk to them about the correction. Always remembering to correct rather than to criticize. What is it that you want? That's what you're going to grow. So, next piece here on the next slide, I want to talk to you about preparing for your school year. I would suggest that you get as many supplies as you can think of to start the school year out with and have a good stock on hand so you're not constantly running to the store. Be prepared and organized with your stuff. It will save you so much time. I used to, in the very first year, I made the mistake of having everything I organized and bringing it out for my kids and putting it away. I mean, I was really their servant. And then I realized, what am I doing? I'm spending all this time on organizing stuff. And so now I really make them responsible. My youngest granddaughter, actually, when I was at our school conference last week, she sent me a text because I'd asked her if she could go in. I'd bought all the stuff. I said, go into the old stuff, throw out the pens that are dry, get rid of everything, reorganize the shelves. And she sent me a video right as I was talking about this to our families, our new families. They can do it. I have things organized in bins that they pull out. They know where things go. They put it back. That's teaching those organizational skills. Have your kids do it. Have a lot of stuff on hand, honestly, because it'll save you so much time. From note cards to tabs to glue sticks to pens to papers to graph paper, all those things. Come up with a list of supplies and make sure that you're stocked because you want to save time or you don't want to be wasting it. So I would say be prepared. Secondly, the next slide is have a schedule. It doesn't have to be rigid, but if there's one thing that has worked for our families and that has also been a problem is when you don't have a schedule. I had one mom call me with 5 children a number of years ago, and she says, I can't do this. She had toddlers, and she had 3 in the model, and she says, I cannot do anything. So I asked her about her schedule, and she says, a schedule? She says, I just fit in school as it fits. She didn't have a schedule. But when she actually worked out a schedule for her, it doesn't have to look like your friend or somebody else, her life settled. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, kids need routine and structure, okay? They need predictable routines. They do best when they know what's happening. I have a very clearly defined structure to my day that I've held on to for many years. My kids know what to do when they come in. Is there flexibility? Of course. There has to be. And it works for us. And what I've learned on that is that I always start out the day with prayer and a focus on something spiritual. And I start there. I actually have my grandkids do journals, and that's where we start. But then I have 3 work sessions that I've broken my day into, and I always start with each one with the goal of what they need to accomplish. So I've broken that list of things into chunks. So it's not this checklist that I'm just working through. I always start with math first with my kids because I want to get through the hard thing that is usually taking the most tedious work first. But we have, okay, and I tell them we're going to be working on this, and when this is done and this amount of work is done, we get a break, okay? So they take a break, they come back for snack, and it's over snack that I choose to do things like recitation and read alouds and memory verse recitation and all those things that you can do together. So I bring those kind of things, and then I talk to them about the next chunk before lunch. Okay, and as the kids get older, I give them a little bit more choice, but usually in grammar school, I think it's better for you to kind of decide for them, honestly. And usually for me, it was the reading and the grammar, the writing pieces. Over lunch, I honestly plan simple, have things on hand that are simple and easy for you to do that you're not having to worry about lunch, have that stocked too. I also learned if you have multiple kids, when I send them out on recess, they know, you know how kids and siblings and cousins, because they live next door to each other, are going to have fights, that sibling rivalry. I learned not to be the referee, okay? Don't be the referee because you can have lots more things to referee. They'll pull you into things. So I learned this little trick. When they go outside and they come in with a complaint, I tell them, okay, you guys have had a conflict. You are welcome to come into my classroom once you've solved it yourself and you come in with the same story. Because they always have different stories, right? So I just had them wait outside and I say, you're welcome to come in when you both can come in, concluding together what happened. Because I want them to work out the problems. I don't want to work out. You can spend a lot of time in sibling rivalry if you don't have a plan of action there, okay? But the schedule is so important. Have a start time and an end time. I know your school's going to do what we do. We give an amount of time we assume a lesson's going to take. Don't let your child drag it out. Say, okay, we're going to have this much time to do math. What happens for you if you've tightened time on a project or if you have 2 weeks to do it? When are you going to do more efficient work? Right. So you want to teach your kid how to be diligent and efficient and effective with their work. So don't let it drag on. Teach them really good ways to manage their time. And that's what chunking your day will do. Okay, you need to be done with this by that. Good enough has to be good enough sometimes, right? We don't want to, this model is not about you taking 12 hours at home. You want to have an end point, and particularly as your kids get older, they need to know, hey, I am done at this point. So take advantage of me when you have me, because then I have the rest of my day to do other things. And if you aren't done, you're on your own. That's worked with our kids as they get older, 3rd and 4th grade even. Hey, take advantage, I'm here for you. But Don't let them just drag everything out and make this hang over your head all day. You have a life outside of teaching your kids at home, right? Unless you guys have anything else to do? No. Okay, so next, if at all possible, put aside other tasks, put aside your phone, put aside your laptop when they're working, because what happens if you're not attending to your young kids and they're doing schoolwork? They're not attending either. So it doesn't mean you're sitting by them and hovering over them on every step of the way, but even with my last year, my 5th and 7th graders, I wasn't doing the writing for them. I wasn't reading with them, but I was watching, I was checking, I was there, I was asking questions, I was having them narrate back to me. But if I'm off doing my own stuff, so are they. So I would really encourage you you're going to miss out on opportunities. All these little things that I'm telling you right now, grow your time to actually disciple. Okay, you're going to miss out on opportunities if you're multitasking away the time you have with them. Take advantage of that time, because I can tell you this, it will go by fast. Some days, you hear the saying, some days are going to feel long, but the years are so fast. Before you know it, they won't be needing you, and you want to really take advantage of this time. Make sense? Highly, highly encourage that. So, next slide. Patience. This is a learning curve for you, and it's a learning curve for your kids. I get that. I remember well. I remember every year I learned something. Know that it's going to take time for you to feel like you're in a rhythm with this. It's okay. No, it's going to take you time to understand how you're working with your child. That's okay. Because if you're new to this and you haven't done any homeschooling at home, or you're partnering now with a school and you haven't obviously done this model before, it's going to take time. And it's going to take time for your child too. Some kids don't do well with transition. They wait and try to figure it out. But I just think it's so important that you're patient there. And next, I think we talked about this a little earlier, but they need to do work that's challenging. That's hard for kids today. It really is. I don't know what your philosophy is on screens or iPhones and things, but I would just limit as much as you can. To them, it's entertainment, and it's kind of this toggling of the brain. And if they're doing too much of it, they have a hard time to settle down and really think. It's hard to be at rest. It's hard to have to work and think deeply because everything on the screens is just so surfacey. That if, as much as possible, have good limits in place for screen time. You guys aren't at the age where iPhones are a huge issue yet, so we won't talk about that today, but do be thinking forward about what your plan is. There's no question kids need to learn how to use iPhones responsibly before they leave your home. They are a tool. We live in an AI world. We're working through our AI policies right now. All these things your kids are going to have to learn to do. But if you could put off screens and all this stuff as much as possible at this stage, it'll give your kids' brains a chance to learn how to think and gain some of these executive function skills and things that they might not otherwise get. Okay? And the last slide I have for you is be clear about your expectations. Say what you mean what you say. It's so easy and tempting to continually, we talked about this, about reminding your kids, nagging them, getting them to mind, and then you finally reach that point when they haven't, that you get really upset and you zap them and you say something you wish you hadn't said. And then you have to go back to feeling bad about it, and you go back to ignoring. Just know that for them to trust your word, they need to know that you say what you mean and mean what you say. And this is the beauty of this model at home is you have this opportunity to disciple their hearts, to teach perseverance when their work is hard, humility when mistakes are made, responsibility when something is forgotten, kindness when relationships are difficult, and gratitude when learning is such a joy, right? You have so many opportunities. And that's why I'm encouraging you to be attentive, not multitasking. Do what you can. Set up a schedule. Be prepared so that your time can go into what really matters and you're not floundering around trying to make it all work. The final slide I have for you is just, there's the 8 Great Smarts in the beginning right there. Back when I was teaching my first grandkids in grammar school, I wrote the book Free to Parent, and it's still being used. I'm actually planning to revise it later this year and update it, but it's a focus on how to be both truth and grace together. That was my plan, was to build out practical tips for parents of young kids on how to do both. And then every Parent's Calling is a vision and a lot of practical tips for the day. It has schedules in there, has ways to organize. It has tips for organizing your home spaces by veteran moms in the back. It has a lot of information for you if you're wanting to take this further. But I think I have like 5 minutes before your next person comes. So once again, I like to always close if there are any questions or thoughts or things that I didn't cover that I need to talk about. Hopefully this was a little bit more practical.
I know we briefly went over like us to have a schedule. They're spending about 7 to 8 hours here. How much time does the school expect parents at home?
Yeah.
To spend?
I can tell you what we do at Veritas, and I'm sure you're going to learn that here. And for us, like, we kind of block it out in the lesson plans that go home. Kindergarten is like 2.5, 3 hours at our school. First, second grade is going to be more 4 hours. Third, fourth is more around 5. It kind of grows. They're doing more, you're doing less, so it doesn't mean you're right? But that then included in that are your breaks and your lunches and all the other things you're doing. That is kind of what works for us to get all the work done, because you are in a full-time school, right? Daily. Well, that's the days at home, yes. Mm-hmm. I don't know what yours is going to be. I would imagine it'll be pretty similar. We have tomorrow our grammar school head, our grammar school dean, and our reading specialist and our School of Logic head, who was a parent doing co-teaching at home during the grammar school years, will all be here. And they're going to give you lots of stuff. The beauty of them all coming, they're not only people who work in our school, but they've also are parents in our school. So they walked their kids through those. They've been on both sides of the model, in the classroom and at home, and they still are. So you're going to hear from some veteran people who have been doing this for many years and still have young kids at home too. So I think that'll be a real blessing for you tomorrow to hear from them. Any other thoughts or questions?
What is a practical tip for a parent who can find themselves leaning towards perfectionism?
So, practical tip for a parent leaning toward perfectionism. Can I just tell you, this is so common, and what you need to continually keep in mind is getting your eyes off the outcomes. Because what we do is we scare our kids because they think it's all about the outcomes, and you focus on growth, you focus on effort, right? You focus on assessing habits rather than grades, and take a deep breath, because my guess is for our perfectionistic parents, you're going to I have one perfectionistic child and the others that kind of were like, I wanted them to be more, right? But you need to make sure that you address that. With my perfectionistic grandchild, when she would wrinkle up her paper because it wasn't perfect, I would make her unfold it, and that's what she would turn in. You need to address perfectionism because it will hold them back and grow really anxious hearts. And they wind up with this attitude of, I'm never good enough, and then suddenly that becomes something with the gospel too, right? So their righteousness has to be the righteousness of Christ, not their own. There's so many tips. We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I do have a PowerPoint slide on perfectionism that we talked on last week at my school. If anyone wants it, I'll send you those slides. It has a lot of information. Okay. You have it.
Since you're a
You know, that is a really good point. And if I have time to address that, I would tell you with little kids, make sure they are doing something where their feet are on the ground. Okay? Because OT will tell you they need to, if they're like come on a counter and their feet are dangling, they can't pay attention as well. So do think about the fact, I would recommend a desk or a table that is their height. I always had a little table that I could adjust to their height when they were little because they have to be able to be in that position to pay good attention. Now, as my kids have gotten older and they don't need, you know, they're not as little, I still have them all where I can see them. If they're doing a test or something, I'll put someone in a back room. But they've picked kind of locations where they want, and they always go back to the same location. And I know my one grandson who's going to be the movement one, he's kind of setting apart, but he likes that. They kind of pick their own routine and what works for them. But when they're little, just make sure that the setting, if you have a distractible child, don't have a lot of stuff around. Like have a clear table, but always make sure if you have a movement kid, like my boys, have something like I bought that, I don't know what it was called, this flat half circle thing that he would push on his feet when he was working. I actually let him chew gum. That was helpful too, for him to think. But just think about the location. It doesn't have to look the same, what's going to work for your children and what works for you. Okay? I think I've taken up all the time. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hey, if you're taking great notes that can compete with these, then, and they're organized, you know, in a readable way, you might take your notes and give those to Kendra, you know, at the end of the day or tomorrow afternoon. Let her make copies and then we can distribute to those who are more auditory listeners. Maybe they give them a little out.
All right, I want to